She thought it was just a quip, fix this mess of a company, and I'll marry you. But when the janitor quietly revealed her misstep in front of investors, the office dynamic began to transform. The boardroom on the top floor of the Burnham Center in downtown Chicago was crowded, sharp-dressed executives seated around a gleaming oak table, coffee mugs steaming, laptops casting a soft blue glow. It was the quarterly strategy session, the kind that could shape or shatter a company's trajectory. The air was thick with tension, but for Victoria Holstead, the 46-year-old CEO, it was just another platform to dazzle. Known for her biting humor and relentless drive, she thrived in the spotlight, though things weren't going smoothly that morning. The presentation system had crashed moments before investors joined remotely, the projector screen blank, cables in disarray under the table, and board members shifting restlessly. Victoria, her patience fraying, drummed her pen on the table, surveying the room like a conductor waiting for the orchestra to fall in line. Then the door swung open. Darnell Cooper, the janitor who'd served the building for nearly 20 years, stepped in, dressed in his standard Navy uniform, sleeves slightly rolled, carrying a tool bag that jingled softly with each step. Darnell wasn't meant to be at these meetings, he was typically unseen in such moments, but a dripping vent above the table had called for his expertise, and he was accustomed to fixing problems without fanfare. Annoyed, Victoria saw a chance to lighten the mood and score a laugh. With a sly grin, she raised her voice for all to hear, "Tell you what, Darnell, get this company running smoothly, and I'll walk down the aisle with you." A few nervous laughs echoed around the table. One director hid a smirk, another shifted awkwardly, while others stared at their screens, unsure how to react. Victoria leaned back, pleased with her wit. Darnell paused, glancing up from his bag. His calm eyes scanned the room, and the silence that followed was heavier than she'd anticipated. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady, "I'll check the system, ma'am. Might be easier than you think." No one responded, the only sound was the faint drip of the vent above. Darnell set his bag down, knelt by the projector's wiring, and began working with practiced precision, untangling cords with the ease of someone who'd tackled such chaos countless times. "What's he doing?" one board member whispered. "Looks like he knows more than we do," another muttered. In under 5 minutes, Darnell found the problem, a loose connector hidden beneath the table's panel. He adjusted it, secured the wires, and pressed the power button. The projector hummed to life, casting a sharp glow across the screen. Gasps and quiet murmurs filled the room. Wiping his hands on a rag, Darnell spoke again, not to Victoria but to the group. "Connection was off. Check this panel regularly, or it'll act up again. I can leave a note." The room fell silent. A few investors smiled with relief as the presentation slides reappeared, their day saved by the man who wasn't supposed to be there. Victoria's grin faded. She hadn't expected him to resolve it, especially not in front of everyone. What was meant as a throwaway jest had turned the focus onto the very person she'd teased. One executive leaned to another, whispering, "Did you see that? He just fixed it." The tension wasn't about the broken system anymore, it was about the fractured respect in the room, and everyone sensed it. Darnell picked up his bag, glanced at Victoria with no trace of resentment, just quiet confidence, and asked, "Anything else you need before I leave?" For once, Victoria had no sharp comeback. She opened her mouth, then closed it, adjusting her glasses instead. The laugh she'd sought now felt like a weight in her chest. Darnell gave a small nod and exited, the boardroom door clicking shut, leaving an uneasy silence no coffee could dispel. The meeting was meant to focus on quarterly figures, growth plans, and logistics, but everyone knew the real story had already unfolded. What they didn't yet grasp was that this brief exchange would ripple far beyond that room, reshaping power, respect, and the company's future. Victoria Holstead's rise to the top was no fluke. At 46, she was a leader who thrived under pressure, measuring her worth in spreadsheets and the deference of those around her. She'd spent nearly 2 decades climbing into executive roles, often the only woman among men twice her age. By the time she became CEO of Halstead Logistics, a mid-sized firm in downtown Chicago, she'd earned a reputation for razor-sharp intellect and, at times, icy demeanor. Colleagues called her brilliant but daunting, investors valued her knack for turning struggling accounts into wins, though employees murmured about her cutting remarks and dismissive humor. To Victoria, being in charge meant being untouchable, respect was demanded, not given. That morning, when the projector failed and Darnell appeared, her quip was in character. She often used humor, sometimes at others' expense, to reclaim control when things slipped. Darnell Cooper, however, lived in a different realm. At 52, he'd spent his life working with his hands. Raised in Gary, Indiana, in a family that prized effort over titles, his father fixed engines in their driveway, and his mother worked long diner shifts. From them, Darnell learned patience, precision, and humility. After high school, he served in the Army, gaining technical skills and a knack for solving problems under pressure. Returning home, he never chased prestige, instead finding steady work as a janitor, eventually joining the Burnham Center's staff. To many, his life seemed modest, but to Darnell, stability trumped status. Known among security guards, receptionists, and maintenance crews as the men who could fix anything, a leaky pipe, a wobbly chair, a stubborn projector, his quiet competence was his hallmark. Yet, despite 2 decades of service, he was invisible to executives. They passed him daily in the lobby, offering a nod at best, never learning his name or story. To them, he was background noise. That invisibility was both a shield and a burden. Darnell didn't mind being overlooked, but moments like Victoria's flippant comment highlighted the divide between the executives upstairs and the workers who kept the building running. That divide was stark on the day of the quarterly meeting. The stakes were high, investors from Los Angeles, Dallas, and Phoenix were dialed in, and the company, grappling with shipping delays and losing ground to competitors, needed Victoria's leadership to shine. When the system crashed, it wasn't just a glitch, it was a threat to her image. Darnell's presence gave her an outlet to deflect that pressure with a quip, a reminder to the room that she held the reins. But instead of reinforcing her authority, the moment backfired. Unlike the executives, frozen at their laptops, Darnell didn't flinch or retreat. His skills, honed over years, spoke louder than her sarcasm, and the boardroom noticed, for some, it was the first time they truly saw him, not just a janitor, but a man with skill and dignity. They saw how swiftly he solved a problem that neither they nor the IT team could handle in the moment. The contrast was stark. Victoria, polished and commanding, had mocked him before an audience. Darnell, overlooked and underestimated, responded with expertise and grace. One sought control, the other simply did what was needed. Back in the hallway, Darnell returned to his routine, signing a maintenance log, greeting the receptionist by name, and checking his schedule. To him, it was just another fix. But in the boardroom, executives were still processing what they'd witnessed. Some whispered, others shifted uncomfortably, all aware something had shifted. Victoria, rigid in her chair, moved to her slides as if nothing had happened, but she felt the sting. She'd spent years commanding rooms, yet for the first time, someone else left the lasting impression. The projector hummed back to life, slides glowing on the wall, sharp graphs, crisp bullet points, the quarterly results Victoria had spent all week preparing. Yet instead of triumph, she felt unease. It wasn't the data or the investors, it was the silence when Darnell fixed what she couldn't. Adjusting her blazer, she steadied her voice. As you can see, Halstead Logistics has held strong market share despite industry challenges. Her words were clear, but the room felt distracted. Victoria knew how to read a crowd, and this one was restless. At the table's far end, John Ellery, a seasoned board member from Dallas, leaned to a colleague, whispering just loud enough for her to catch. Impressive. Handled it better than most. She gripped the clicker tighter. Normally, boardroom praise fueled her, but this wasn't about her. The meeting pressed on, but the incident lingered like a splinter. The quarterly numbers showed modest growth, tempered by rising competition from giants like XPO and C.H. Robinson. Victoria framed each slide with confidence, touting efficiencies and cost cuts, but the investors' questions lacked their usual bite. They seemed distracted, as if the morning's real highlight had already passed. Halfway through, the projector flickered briefly, drawing nervous chuckles. Eyes darted to the door, half expecting Darnell's return. The reaction stung Victoria. She cleared her throat and pushed forward, hiding her irritation. Then Daniel Ruiz, a younger director from Phoenix, spoke up. Victoria, about your operational strategy, you mentioned cost savings, but what about facility efficiency? Maintenance, for instance, seems like a weak point. The question was sharp but not hostile. Still, she bristled, knowing why it was asked. We have a facilities contract for that, she replied curtly. Today was a fluke, nothing more. Ruiz raised an eyebrow but didn't push, though the exchanged glances around the table said enough. Outside, Darnell signed off his maintenance log, catching faint meeting sounds through the boardroom door, laughter, whispers, silences. He'd seen enough late-night cleanings to know how power shifted in those walls. Back in the room, Victoria wrapped her presentation, discussing Midwest expansions, fleet upgrades, and supply chain optimizations. Her delivery was polished, but the spark was gone. The incident had altered the atmosphere. Every point she made, every slide she advanced, was measured against the memory of a janitor kneeling under the table, fixing what a room of executives couldn't. The applause was polite but lacked the enthusiasm she expected. Investors asked surface-level questions, missing the energy she relied on. The board chair, Harold Kent from Minneapolis, spoke, "Thank you, Victoria. We'll review and follow up. Let's take a recess." Chairs scraped, murmurs rose, and several board members drifted to the hallway, passing Darnell by the service elevator with nods, not of dismissal, but respect. Victoria lingered, scrolling her notes with forced focus. She'd delivered her numbers, but the victory felt hollow. Her quip had turned into whispers she couldn't control. She'd aimed to assert dominance, but the strongest memory might be of the men she'd mocked. The real turning point, though, wasn't the presentation, it was the conversations brewing outside, where Darnell's name began to ripple in ways she hadn't foreseen. The boardroom emptied slowly, like a theater after an uncertain finale. Executives stretched, checked phones, and drifted to the lobby's coffee station. The usual post-meeting buzz was subdued, not about numbers or strategy, but about a single moment. Victoria, still at the table's head, scrolled her notes, sensing the whispers. Near the coffee station, two junior directors spoke softly. "Did you hear her?" one asked. "Fix this company, and I'll marry you." I couldn't believe it. The other shook his head, but the way he handled it, calm, fixed it, walked away. That's what stuck. They weren't alone. John Ellery, sipping coffee, turned to Daniel Ruiz. "I've seen billion-dollar clients panic over less." "That janitor, what's his name?" "Darnell," Ruiz replied. "More composure than most executives." Victoria rose, straightening her blazer, and stepped into the hallway, her heels clicking on marble. She nodded to Ellery and Ruiz. "Gentlemen, thank you for today. The numbers were clear, I trust." Ellery glanced at her, polite but distant, clear enough, but what stood out wasn't the numbers. Victoria froze, then laughed lightly, brushing it off. "You mean my quip? I tease everyone, keeps things lively." Ruiz didn't smile. Sometimes it's not heard as a joke, especially when the one you teased saves the day. The comment hit like a barb. Victoria's smile tightened, but she excused herself to her office. Downstairs, Darnell restocked his cleaning supplies, the morning rush fading. The receptionist, Gloria Ramirez, grinned. "Heard you saved the boss's meeting." "Just a loose connector," he said. "Not what I heard," she teased. "They're talking like you saved the Titanic." Darnell chuckled but said little. He knew attention could cut both ways. Yet something had shifted. People looked at him differently now, with respect or curiosity. Upstairs, Victoria shut her office door, exhaling sharply. She'd mastered keeping the upper hand, but today, with one quip, she'd faltered. Worse, the men she'd targeted had turned it into a quiet victory. She replayed it, the smirk, the laughs, the heavy silence. Darnell's steady gaze, not angry or humiliated, unnerved her more than any retort could. It was the look of someone who knew his worth, even if others didn't. In the cafeteria, whispers grew louder. Employees clustered, sharing versions of the story. "She said what? And he fixed it right there, in front of the board." The tale spread fast, becoming legend. The CEO mocked the janitor, and he outshone her. By day's end, nearly every executive floor had heard it. Some laughed, others frowned, but none dismissed it. For Victoria, this was perilous. Her leadership hinged on perceived control. Once questioned, cracks could widen. She needed to regain ground, but the damage was done. For Darnell, it was another day. He returned to his Gary apartment, greeted by dinner's familiar aroma. His sister Charlene teased, "Late again. What broke this time?" "Projector," he said, setting down his bag. "Bet you saved someone's skin again," she said. Darnell smiled but didn't mention the quip or the silence. He wasn't one to dwell, but he wondered how long that moment would echo in Halstead's halls. Neither he nor Victoria fully grasped it yet, but the throwaway line was about to snowball into a test of pride, humility, and the weight of respect in a place built on